talking to you about a concept that's very near and dear to my heart, and that is productivity. I'm not only going to be telling you today about why productivity is so important for the staffing industry, but I'm also going to be providing you with a few actionable insights so that way you can position yourselves for where the labor market is going to be once we see the economy recover. So to begin, if I may. So to begin, we can see that broadly, churn within the labor market is decelerating. So to start with the good news, we're seeing that employers are sticking by their employees because quits and layoffs remain low. However, we're also seeing that new opportunities in the labor market are declining, as can be seen through a decrease in job openings as well as quits. So, what we're seeing is an imbalance between new opportunities within the labor market, signified by openings and hires, and separations, signified by quits and layoffs. And so, that imbalance fuels what's called decreased labor leverage, which is driving this slowdown in labor churn. Labor leverage is an interesting concept. It is an indicator of the strength of, or who has leverage within the employment relationship, whether that is employees or employers. When employees have more leverage over their employers, employees are more likely to go out onto the open labor market, find the best possible opportunities, and potentially move jobs. That would mean that employers are more likely to replace that lost headcount. However, when that is reversed, when employers have more leverage over their employees, employees are more likely to stay where they are. Furthermore, if employers if they reduce headcount, then that means that employers are not always as willing to replace headcount due to decreasing labor costs or trying to remain economically competitive within a tight economic environment as we see ourselves today. So, looking at the trajectory of labor churn since the Great Resignation in about 2022 to 2023, we can see that labor leverage has slowly started to decrease, and that has complemented a decline within temporary health services employment. But there is a silver lining to that decline. And we see that by looking at our very own ASA staffing index, which is staffing employment seems to have hit a trough. So, unlike what we saw in 2021 and 2022, where there was a clear directional increase in staffing employment, or even in 2023, when we saw a clear directional decline in staffing employment, in 2024, we're seeing that the industry seems to have bottomed out. And so, what this data shows is that the labor market still appreciates the value of our niche industry, the value that staffing companies bring to the broader labor market. However, many employers are having to pass up on that opportunity right now because of those tightening economic conditions in which we all find ourselves. Of course, we know that one of the biggest drivers of these tightening economic conditions today is interest rates, which have been escalated quite quickly over the past year by the Federal Reserve as it seeks to bring inflation back down towards optimal levels. Now, due to recent volatility within the labor market, we know that the Federal Reserve is most likely going to start reducing interest rates in very quick fashion, actually starting tomorrow when it announces the results of its September policy meeting. However, the question that many are asking is how quickly will those interest rates, will those declines in interest rates take to then permeate into the labor market? And the unfortunate answer is that it varies. Monetary policy, its effect on the labor market tends to vary, particularly based on different sectors and whether those sectors are interest rate sensitive or interest rate insensitive. In other words, does the rate of change in labor costs within a particular sector, what are those faster or are those slower than the rate of change in monetary policy? And so what we can see in this graph is that interest rate sensitive sectors tend to recover much quickly from a decrease in monetary policy because they are more sensitive to labor costs. However, interest rate insensitive sectors, they don't decrease as much when monetary policy is tightened, but they're also going to take a longer time to recover when monetary policy is loosened. And so using this paradigm of interest rate sensitive sectors and interest rate insensitive sectors, we can get an idea of what it will take for the staffing industry to recover as interest rates decline. So using estimates of staffing employment by major sector, we can see that staffing employment is fairly diversified. We see that, staffing employment is predominant within trade, transportation, and utilities, most of which with the exception of utilities, are interest rate insensitive. Similarly, staffing employment has made a strong roots within the information sector, which is also very interest rate insensitive. Additionally, though, within the professional and business services segment, particularly when it comes to research and development, so scientific, technical, engineering fields, those are very interest rate sensitive. Same thing with education and health services, particularly healthcare. Healthcare is also a very interest rate sensitive sector. So as you can see by this chart, the staffing industry, because it is connected to so many different sectors within the economy, it is likely not going to recover faster than the labor market, but also it's not going to recover slower than the labor market. It's going to recover right around the same time as the labor market. And so therefore, knowing that both the labor market and staffing are not going to see immediate relief from interest rates, but that interest rates are going to take time to permeate throughout the labor market and reduce labor costs. We know that productivity is still going to remain top of mind. As you can see in this chart, output generally mirrors changes in inputs, which are defined as either employment or hours. However, what we again have started to see since 2022, when interest rates began to increase, is that output continued to rise and has now started to plateau, while employment and hours have decreased. So what that means is that companies are understanding that labor costs are going to remain high for the foreseeable future. Employers are starting to figure out how to do the same, if not more, with less. We also see this when looking at a change in output over the past year, 2022 to 2023, to the change in employment in that same time frame. As we can see by this chart, the change in output is much more concentrated if it declined. And in many cases, it also increased between 2022 and 2023. However, the same cannot be said for changes within employment. In many industries, employment declined, obviously, due to higher labor costs. And because of that, we have seen that output has outpaced employment, which means, again, that the productivity revolution is taking a hold of the broader labor market. Just to emphasize how much productivity is going to hit close to home, the McKinsey Global Institute, they did a study in which they looked at generative AI. So AI technology, very big component of productivity. They were able to find that generative AI could be developed and deployed to replace human resources functions much faster than many other business segments, with the exception of software engineering. So what this chart shows is that if the productivity revolution is already taking the broader labor market by storm, our industry needs to do the same. It needs to pivot, it needs to adapt and position itself for the labor market of tomorrow. And so the good news is that staffing companies already have a penchant for diversification. As we can see, 20 years ago, temporary staffing services comprised around about 90% of total industry revenue. That figure is now just under 70% or just under 80%. And much of this diversification has occurred in the aftermath of the pandemic, with more attention being paid towards long-term staffing as well as other operating revenue. So we know that our industry is capable of adapting, but how? Well, Bullhorn actually did a very fascinating study on this sort of diversification that is going on within the staffing industry. And as you can see, there are many different segments that staffing companies are branching into in order to sustain revenues. That includes consulting and project management, more employer facing, but also more employee facing with candidate training and reskilling, as well as outsourcing centers. And so, what this shows is that, again, our industry is very adaptable. However, there is no one tried and true blueprint for this adaptability. Every staffing company is going to need to take stock of the industries that it serves, the businesses that it serves, the unique economic conditions that are affecting those areas in order to determine which of these segments are most appropriate to be able to pivot towards. And so, therefore, I'm going to conclude my talk to you today by giving you 5 insights that might be able to help guide your company in knowing where the labor market will be tomorrow and being able to figure out which of these segments could be better for your could be interesting to explore for your company. Let's start on the employee side. Employees value increased flexibility. According to recent research by the American Staffing Association, 71% of employees value some sort of flexible work arrangement. And that is important because now what we've started to see since the pandemic is that the hybrid work model works in many cases. Not in every case, like say construction sector, mining or natural gases, but in other cases, like say professional business services or administrative services, or in certain industrials occupations. Now, a lot of this decline that we've seen in full-time and part-time work hours spent on the job, so to speak, has largely been due to a decline within travel, which is also helped by the increase in adoption of hybrid work models. But this is something that is going to stick around for the foreseeable future, no matter what CEOs like Jamie Dimon or Elon Musk say. And so, therefore, it's going to be important when it comes to attracting and retaining employees that folks are more cognizant that flexibility remains important. Additionally, employees also value increased benefits. No longer is just a large paycheck suffice because employees are looking for the work-life experience. And so, therefore, this chart shows the change in access to benefits over the past 10 years and the projected change in employment according to recent statistics from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which projected employment in various occupations from 2023 to 2033. So what we can see is that certain benefits are directly correlated to industries and occupations that are projected to grow over the next 10 years, particularly a flexible workplace, which we just discussed. In addition, retirement benefits, as well as healthcare benefits. So therefore, employees are not just looking for a steady paycheck, they are looking for the full package. And that can also be a key indicator for staffing companies in knowing when they might see increased labor churn within a particular company or sector, and where they might be able to step in and provide some value added. Now let's pivot over to the employer side. David mentioned that in some of the earlier presentations, you all got to hear about the impact that AI is having not only within the broader economy, but specifically within the human resources space. And as you can see by this chart, those industries that have more exposure to AI, they are projected to grow faster than those with less exposure to AI. And so this is important because many folks, according to IBM, 30% of all workers believe that AI is going to be what's called a job killer. However, the opposite is in fact true. Even in occupations that were projected to decline in the next 10 years, we saw that those with significant exposure to AI were projected to decrease significantly less than those that had less exposure to AI. And so what that means is that AI is going to prompt a change in what employers are looking for from their employees. So in occupations like management or business financial operations, they're not going to be necessarily looking to reduce headcount. They're going to be looking for headcount that can complement the abilities of AI. What do I mean by that? Well, we can see from this next chart that employers are looking for more professionally malleable employees. So skills such as science, mechanical skills, or even physical strength and stamina, those are ranked very low in the totem pole when it comes to skills that employers are looking for the most. In fact, employers are looking for their employees to be more adaptable or detail oriented or being able to problem solve more. And the reason why these skills are so important is because these skills allow for employees and for companies to execute second and third order levels of thinking, which are going to complement a lot of that first order level of thinking that AI is meant to replace. For example, because AI is being able to replace a lot of top of funnel activities within the staffing industry. Now, many companies are looking for employees who can execute second and third order levels of thought, which is being able to say sift through two applications that have been culled by an AI program, or being able to say, being able to think about the content of an acceptance or offer letter that gets drafted by AI but does not get sent out to the candidate just as of yet. Five, and finally, what I would consider to be most important, maintaining employee engagement is going to be absolutely essential to workforce retention. And when employee engagement is low, we are going to see increased labor churn complement to when economic conditions also improve. According to Gallup, 30% of employees, just 30, are fully engaged with their jobs. And so, because of that, they actually did some research on what would make employees more engaged with their company. And the biggest answers were a greater work-life balance, harkening back to employees are valuing an increasingly flexible workplace, and that those occupations that provide increased flexibility, they are likely to grow much faster over the next 10 years. There's also greater alignment with interests and skills because employees want to be able to be more engaged in the work that they do. And very similarly, not much of a surprise, increased income and benefits as well as increased stability. Because once again, we realized that since the pandemic and during the Great Resignation, employees were looking for more, and part of that work-life balance was being able to have a sufficient amount of income to pursue their other interests and being able to simply have peace of mind over their employment prospects or their employment status. So therefore, what we know right now is that productivity is going to remain top of mind for the staffing industry because labor churn is declining, because interest rates are going to take some time to affect both the labor market and the staffing industry, and because productivity itself is already taking the broader labor market by storm. And so, therefore, when it comes to how you can better diversify your activities as a staffing company, five trends that you might want to think quite closely about is the fact that employees are valuing more flexibility, that they are looking more towards benefits rather than just a steady paycheck, that employers are going to be looking for more professionally malleable employees. And that is because of this broader AI revolution that we're seeing due to much of these improvements in productivity that we're seeing. And finally, that employee engagement is going to be critical for either maintaining current headcount at different companies, or it's going to be a significant driver of future labor churn if employers are not able or willing to adapt. And so, therefore, I'm going to leave you with this. Every industry goes through its peaks and troughs. In 2001, a lot of these dot-com startups, they ended up bottoming out after the dot-com bubble in 2001. Very similarly, what we saw in 2008 was that a lot of these new real estate companies, they started up, but then when the Great Recession happened and the housing market went under, the real estate industry also went through a significant trough. And very similarly, what we're seeing within our industry is that we've seen some historic highs in terms of staffing, employment, and sales. But now, as economic conditions tighten, we're also going through a bit of a slump ourselves. However, that does not mean that our industry is dead in the water. Far from it. It just means that our industry, like real estate companies or like dot-com startups, they need to adapt for the future. And because we have the benefit of being so complementary to the broader labor market, being familiar with these sort of trends is going to be the difference maker when it comes to positioning our industry and your company for the trends that we see in the labor market of tomorrow.